Well, hello everybody. It's nice to see you out there. My name is Pam McConaughey and I'm President and CEO of the Greater Brighton Area Chamber of Commerce. And we are going through unprecedented times right now and there's a lot of uncertainty. So we felt that it was in our best interest to bring you a webinar to give you the latest on different issues that are taking place in Livingston County. So we have different speakers. Each speaker will not be speaking that long, so this webinar, even though it's said from 1:30 until 3 or something like that, it will not go that long. But anyway, okay, I am going to begin right now with our Honorable Judge Hatty, and he is the Circuit Court Judge for Livingston County, one of them, but he is the lead in all of that, and so he's going to give you an update on what's going on in the court system.
Good afternoon. These are pretty much unprecedented times that we have in the United States, and I wanted to be able to give everybody an update on how the courts are operating. The courts are open for limited purpose for essential services, and I wanted to make sure that we didn't say that we're closed because I don't want to put a projection out there that the court's closed, but we're only open for things like in custody arraignments, to the extent possible, any previous hearings that we have that are, all right, at any rate, we're open for essential services like in custody arraignments. We're finishing in custody hearings that we can. If there's any personal protection orders that we have to have, we'll do those. Emergency bond motions, emergency domestic motions, emergency show cause hearings and things of that nature, infectious disease cases, and other emergency matters at the discretion of the chief judge. Juvenile is hearing in custody arrangements or in custody hearings that we don't have too many of those, and any emergency hearings at all. So we're available for that. Probate court has emergency mental hearings or emergency proceedings for guardianships or wardships. Things of that nature. Only essential operations are being open. We don't, if you have filings or something, if it's an emergency, we take them. But the fact is that the court's operating as we need to be able to keep things going, but we don't have, we're not having any jury trials. I'm not going to have folks shoulder to shoulder in there. Right now anyway, so we're going to reassess things April 6th. That's kind of it. We just want to make sure that the courts are available to take care of the people's business as necessary. Pam, do you have any questions that I can add to?
Can they ask questions from there?
I think they can.
Okay, does anybody have any questions right now for Judge Hatty?
Most of the hearings we're doing are by remote anyway. We're using a Zoom technology, and we're using other technology that deals with our Polycom, so we're able to have remote access for hearings, and that's working pretty well. I mean, we were going to get to this point at some point where we were going to use remote technology. This just had us get more familiar with the technology a little quicker. But tomorrow I'm going to be doing some sentencings, and if somebody's in jail and they want to not be brought over to the court, I'll do it right over the Polycom. They've got a right to come over. Criminals got a right to be sentenced in person if they want, but we've got the ability to do it remotely, so that's that.
And how long have you had that remote capability?
A few years. It's been getting upgraded, and then we got like another add-on to it about oddly enough, 2-3 months ago. So it's we're able to do more with it. But nobody's coming in the building. We're doing it right at front door. We've got the police there with the mail, and people can drop off filings there, and we'll take care of it. I didn't want to close down the building because I don't want to come back to a mountain of mail in 3 weeks. So we've got the staff there that can handle it. Those that are working off-site are available by phone or by email. Like while I'm here now, my clerk called me up with a question that he had after I put a question to him. He did the research and he wrote me a letter on it, and I called him right back. So we are working remotely, but we've got enough staff there to handle the business of the court at the court, and then we're switching out with other people to work remote to keep social distances like you and I are and Pam and I are. So, okay. But I hope that sort of answers some questions. That I want the folks of Livingston County to know that the courts are open for limited purpose, and just like the other government agencies are speaking to their availability. It's not business as usual, but it's business to handle the things that need to be done. And that's basically what I'd like to convey.
Judge, I'm not sure I had to leave the room for a moment, but is the friend of the court open? They're asking.
Thank you very much. The front of the court is open for, at their office, at the Law Center 210, to have payments dropped off and to handle other matters. But they're definitely there to, the front of the court's open to accept the payments so that the kids can obviously get the support that they need. The other issues that we had was if there's any emergency hearings regarding the front of the court, those can be done on the order of the judge, but most of those hearings are canceled. However, the front of the court is open. They have to be open in order to keep the money coming in for the support of the kids. And they have 2 police at the door, obviously, and a male, and a person there at the front of the court, receptionist to accept payments and docketed them in. Thank you. Thanks for bringing it in. If there are any other questions coming in, I'm glad to field them.
This is our first time doing a webinar, so
All right.
bear with us. So far, so good, though.
Anything else?
We just want to thank this judge here. We just love him. He's such a
My-
friend of the chamber. Here we go. Oh, yeah,
Pleasure.
we're not
All right,
6
see you
feet,
later.
but it is my pleasure now to introduce to you Bert Herzog. He's hobbling in here. He has an injury. He has a boot that I'm very familiar with. And we're so honored to have him as well because he's the founder of Executive Wealth Management. And he's going to reassure you on the market and what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll do my
Peace.
best. I'll do my best. First of all, I want to tell everybody that you need to be calm. We have been here before. This black swan event has happened in the past, and it will happen in the future. I've been doing this since 1981. Please don't do the math. Been through 1987, 1991, 2000 through 2002, 08 and 09, and several corrections in between there. I will tell you that this reminds me most of the 1987 correction. It was a pretty violent and quick downturn, but within a year and a half, we were back up to the previous highs. As a black swan event, it's probably most like 9/11. However, that was right in the middle of the dot-com bubble, and the stock market was already declining, and it took us about 4.5 years to cover from that correction. With the global financial crisis in 08 and 09, it took us about 3.5 years to recover. Don't know what's going to happen this time around, but I feel pretty confident that it's not going to take nearly as long as the global financial crisis. Look, our economy is very strong. We're coming off a month in February where we created 283,000 jobs. What a terrific number. It's been a brutal 19 days since. We're down 30%. However, we are in a much better shape than we were in 08 and 09. Our economy is much more diversified. We are much more liquid, a lot less personal debt, and a lot less leverage. And can you believe we are energy independent? We are in much better shape now than we were in 08 and 09. I truly believe this too shall pass. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that to do something rash right now is probably the wrong move. If you've taken defensive measures, that's great. Work with your team, with your advisor, and make sure you do what's best for your risk profile. But don't overreact to this. In a few months, my guess is in 3 to 6 months, this thing will be a memory. And as we start rebounding, just make sure that you are participating in that rebound. So I would encourage all of you to stay calm and most importantly, support your local businesses. Finally, I just want to leave this with one last thought with you. As I had mentioned earlier, we've been through a lot. This black swan event will pass. I am very, very confident that by the end of this year, we'll come back strongly as an economy. So be patient, be calm, and be smart. I'm open for any questions that anybody might have.
And if they wanted to reach you, how would they do
Yeah,
that?
if feel free to contact Executive Wealth Management. We've been in business since 1985 and been in Brighton since 1986. So we'd be more than happy to take any questions that you might have or handle any needs that you might have financially.
Okay, here's Signature Smiles Brighton. Do you think the small business will be able to get loans from the government?
Yes, that's a great question. The Treasury is actually promoted bypassing the banking system and going directly through the Department of Treasury to access funds. I'm not 100% sure of all the details, but I think if you go online and check for that window, as they call it, you should be able to get more information about getting 0% interest loans.
Okay, I don't see any now. Well, I just want to really thank you. God bless you, and you can continue with the good work. And we
Yes.
like what you said about supporting business.
And please, support your local Chamber of Commerce.
Oh, thank you.
We're here to be a part of this community, and we want to make sure that we take care of everybody.
I appreciate that very much, more than you know, because during these times, it's very stressful for a chamber. Because if businesses are suffering, we are suffering as well. But we will do everything in our power to make sure that
We'll get through
we're here
this.
together.
We'll get through
okay.
this.
Okay, it is now my pleasure to introduce to you, and we're really fortunate to have her, Dr. Varsha Maudgal, and she is Chief Medical Officer for St. Joe Mercy, and she is also an infectious disease doctor, and so she's very busy at this time with a lot of planning. So we are so grateful that you took the time to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. And I'm grateful to be here to speak to you about some of the things that St. Joe's is doing to help the community with this really unprecedented event. But the first thing I want to say to the community, and I can say this as an infectious disease doctor who's been through some other epidemics in the past, is that the most important thing that we need as a community right now is to be calm and to support each other. Please know that St. Joe's has stood up multi-group task forces, and we've done this for quite a while now, even before the recent escalation in the few weeks, to try and address this situation sort of globally from multiple facets to do the best that we can for our patients and our community. So we at Trinity, being that we are a national healthcare system, we are well prepared to address crises such as this. Please know that the EDs at both Livingston and Brighton are open to provide patient care as needed. Even in extraordinary times such as these, we recognize that patients will have ongoing healthcare needs, an ankle sprain, injuries, things of that nature, and many other conditions. And we're here for you to help you and to provide provide care through these conditions. I wanted to provide a few points of information for you all. I think most of you read the news and you're sort of aware of some of the common symptoms to be aware of with COVID-19. And the most important things to be aware of are if people have fevers, cough, shortness of breath, and exposure or travel to areas where we know that COVID-19 is endemic, then we would be wanting to screen further to see if that person might have some risk factors for COVID-19. We at St. Joe's have a few other announcements to make. At the hospital at Livingston, we've employed by Governor Whitmer's orders a no visitor restriction with some exceptions, but for the most part, we are asking that the community help support us through this because we want to keep everybody safe. We've canceled events, classes, seminars that are typically held on our campus for right now, with the hope that we'll be able to reinstitute these things in the near future. The most important message I have for the community is, as an infectious disease physician, I want to say to all of you, I think that we should stay calm. That's number one. Hand hygiene is, if you ask me as an ID doc, what's the most important thing I can do to protect myself and my family from COVID? I would say the single most important thing you can do is hand hygiene, making sure your hands don't touch your face and nose, to maintain the social distancing of 6 feet from others, and restricting gathering in larger groups. I think these are important common sense things that we can all do to support each other. And then we at St. Joe's, as I said, our EDs are open, and we stand here ready to serve the community and to help you with all of your healthcare needs. And I can take any questions you might have.
I know it's hard to determine, but how long do you think this is really going to go? And do you think that with the hot weather, it will help to kill it off, or does that not make a difference?
So these are some good questions. Part of it, the reason that it's difficult to address it completely with, in the healthcare industry, we're used to giving you estimates, times, ranges,
Right.
to be able to address these things. And a lot of it is because we've had a history of things that we can look upon in the past and say, this is a reasonable time frame to expect. This is evolving on a daily basis, so it's harder to answer. So I think as long as we recognize that it will be a few months, but the situation is very fluid and evolving. As to your question about the hot weather, I think that remains to be seen.
Right.
The one good thing about summer is that people don't have to congregate in closed settings. People will be able to get out and about. And part of the reason for transmission of viruses during winter month is simply the closeness, because we're in closed quarters with piped in air, and we're not getting out and about. So in general, when you talk about viral infections, they do tend to get better in the summer simply because people can be outside. And so will that bear true for this? I suspect to a part it will. How much will it decrease? I don't think any of us knows that just yet.
Right, because there's rumors that it is the type of virus that can mutate. So I'm just telling you all the
Sure,
rumors.
sure.
So they probably have heard these rumors as well. So.
Sure. So I don't think we have much data to support
that.
this kind of mutation. I think people are scared because this is something that they haven't seen before. It's something that's spreading rapidly in our communities, and there are a small subgroup of patients, and this is what we need to keep in mind. When you have a subgroup of patients that have the outcome, what we need to remember is a vast majority of people do well. So I think that we focus on this subgroup and we should be concerned about our vulnerable population, but I think we all need to take away the message that most of us are going to do just fine. And this virus mutating, rapidly changing every day, I don't think we have any evidence of that happening. So I think it is a virus that does have some unusual features, and it is a virus that has some things where it does tend to impact certain subgroups of the population more than other groups. But I just keep cautioning us that as much as we want to look at this group, the larger, giant majority of people are going to do just fine.
Okay, that's good. I know that there have been talks about quarantining, the nation actually. We have not heard anything on that as yet, just rumors once again. But that would probably be a good thing, wouldn't it, to just stop the progress if we did do that, even for 2 weeks, to just stop everybody communicating with each other face to face.
So I think quarantining the nation is something that you have to take with a little bit of, what does it mean to quarantine a nation?
Right.
Right? Even when we talk about social distancing and self-isolation, I get these questions from patients and physicians all the time. What does self-isolation mean? I am at home with 4 other family members and 3 kids. How do I self-isolate? What does quarantining mean? So I think getting those sort of messages out there is a hard thing to do. And if you're trying to implement it at the level of a country, I would say it's next to impossible to do.
Right.
Having said that, I think if we all followed common sense measures, right? No panicking, making certain that we don't aggregate in large groups and pretty much restrict us getting out and doing what we need to do to the things that need to be done, rather than, social gatherings and so forth that hopefully we can put on hold for just a little while. It doesn't mean this is the end of life as we know it. It means it's a temporary halt to life as we know
Right.
it till we can resume it again, because this thing is not going to go on forever. It seems that way right now, but it's not. It's going to be if you look back to even China, they're resuming life. And if you think back, they were also in isolation and quarantine a couple months ago. So clearly there is a beginning and there is an
It does
end,
help.
and it does get over things, right? So I think that hand hygiene is something that we don't think about. As an infectious disease specialist, I'm always very cognizant of hand hygiene. But as I've been walking around the last few days, and I've been thinking of every knob I touch, every door I open, and I'm thinking of this, and I think, I'm an ID doc, and I'm thinking through this. How many of us are? So I think if we stay within our areas, we wash our hands definitely before we eat. And you won't believe how many people I notice touching their faces that are not even aware that they're touching their faces.
Right. It's just a habit.
So rather than just talking about quarantining the country and us
Get
all
back to
getting
the
concerned,
simple
let's talk about the simple things we can do. Hand hygiene. Try your best to be cognizant of when your hands are going toward your face, staying a respectable distance from each other, so that, because this we know is a droplet-borne infection, and droplets carry about 6 feet from an individual. That's where the whole stay 6 feet away from someone comes through. So if we stay about that distance from someone, and when we're sick, we need to know that it's particularly important, because in this time of the year, this is a time for a regular cold. So many people who have the cough and cold and sniffles are panicked right now because they think that they have the coronavirus. But really, they
Right.
have a cold. It's good to stay away from each other. We've known this for a long time, that we can transmit the cold to each other if we're close.
Sure.
So it's good to stay away from each other, particularly if you're unwell, and to be thinking of our elderly and other vulnerable populations to see what we can do to help each other. The only way we can get through this is as a community. I think that, again, just common sense measures. I know that, people expect, this great medicine or these tips that doctors can offer you. But honestly, I think the most important thing the best thing I can help do for the community is to let you know, A, we're here for you, but B, we should all be here for each other.
Right.
And be calm, because the moment we start panicking, it's that crowd response, which is never good. And we need to not have that kind of panicked response. If we're calm and practice good hygiene habits, I think we'll be safe. And again, keep in mind, if I have to leave everybody with one message, I'll say keep in mind that for the small group of people who are indeed people who have negative outcomes, the vast majority by many-fold do fine even if you get coronavirus. So that's something we have to keep in mind.
I think one of the things that just is so different is that we never talk about if you have a cold or the flu, it's staying on a surface. We've never talked about that. So this is just
I will tell
a
you
little
that
bit
this
different.
and perhaps the common public doesn't talk about that, but for us it's no different.
It
We
is.
talk about that all the time.
Okay.
And I will tell you that most people think the flu is just a mild flu. But as an infectious disease specialist, I see the cases of the flu that are not mild. And, sometimes I wish people would sit up and not take the flu for granted and
I
go
know.
get their vaccines and protect themselves and take care of themselves. I think the novelty of this is what's scaring people more than the fact that it is a respiratory transmitted virus, because honestly, staying on the surface is about the same for a flu and for the common cold as it is for the coronavirus. So it's really no different in my world.
Now I have another question. A friend of mine's daughter-in-law has TB.
Yes.
So, that seemed very different to me too. So what's going on with the TB?
So
Tuberculosis.
Tuberculosis. So tuberculosis has been around forever, right? It's also a public health concern because it is transmitted from person to person. And part of the reason that TB is not endemic as much in the United States as some other countries in the world is because of some other hygiene practices and things that we've put into place. So if you go back to Asia or Africa and look at the cases of TB kills more people there than pretty much most other diseases. So it is one of the world's health concerns, and we are concerned when we have a patient with TB about how they could spread this in the community. It's just because it's few and far in between, because we have effective health control, healthcare control measures that have been implemented. So it's important for us, I'm glad you brought this up, because it's important for us to understand that if we've done this with some communicable diseases, not to say we can't do this with the coronavirus either. I know that it's frightening, and people read these numbers and they see these tickers with 5,000 today,
Right.
6,000 tomorrow, and you're panicking. But think of the number of cases of influenza. I would panic more with that.
You would, okay. Okay, well, that's good. So we had our TB shots when we were little kids, right? Do those still work?
Yeah, so the
Or do-
TB shots were, they work well in countries where the transmission of TB is significant. But, those are not, they're effective, but then a long time ago, because the transmission was so low in the United States, kids now born don't get TB shots.
They don't.
They don't. And so really it's less of a public health hazard because of all the advances that we've done.
So thank you so much for being here and taking the time.
Absolutely,
And thank
my
you to St.
pleasure.
Joe's.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Next, we are fortunate to have two representatives from Cooper and Riesterer Law. And we're going to begin with Kathy Riesterer. And she's going to talk about contracts, employment contracts. She's a specialist in this. We must be having some. There you go. Okay. She's a specialist in this. She just returned from California, and she was at a big talk, and she was the main speaker there, or one of them at least. And so we're fortunate to have Kathy here today. So, Kathy, come.
Okay, thank you, Pam. Glad to be here. And the talk is generally going to be about contracts and business resources. We've been getting a lot of questions, a lot of people panicking because businesses have been closed. A lot of businesses have been affected by the mandatory shutdowns. And a lot of misconception about things, and we've had a lot of questions like, well, this is covered, right? This, I'm not going to be liable for this or that. And so we thought that it would come and give some general information about contracts, how things apply, and just a couple notes to some general resources. I think Bert Herzog from Executive Wealth Management did mention some general resources. Also, as Pam noted, the Brighton Chamber of Commerce is a wonderful resource. Also, the Michigan Chamber of Commerce. When I was looking around for some general resources, we have our another. It's a different ringtone this time. Someone else's phone ringing, but
Alrighty, if you would not mind turning. Thank
there we
you.
go.
That was
person's
fast.
quicker.
Thank you again.
The Michigan Chamber. Oh, it's maybe some background music. The Michigan Chamber of Commerce, also another great resource. Their website is filled with great business resources. So if you're a small business looking for resources, and I think somebody asked Bert a question about the federal loans. If you want information about those, SBA.gov is the resource for those, where the loans are going to be available. And the research that we've been showing looks like their processing is projected to start on Friday, is the information we've been able to receive. And our firm does help people with SBA loans and business loans. So we're going to be monitoring that. We are going to be putting on our website information relating to those loans and information relating to COVID issues. We're going to try and start, we have posts that we put on our website frequently, but we're going to try and start a resource where when clients have questions, we do answers and we post those on our website so we can be an information source through this time. As several of the other people have mentioned, this is a time where we need to come together. We need to be a resource for each other because we will get through this. We'll get through this by working together. Together we stand, divided we fall. And while we have to be divided in our own homes, it doesn't mean we have to separate our resources. It's a time when, from a distance, we can pool our resources and work together. And so we're going to try and do that. So those are some of the great resources, SBA.gov, Michigan Chamber of Commerce. So on the contract issue, so if you have a contract, you're a business that has entered into a big contract and you're worried about either being the person who has to produce and you can't produce the contract or supply the contract because you have been shut down, or you're someone who entered into a contract and now doesn't need the product or doesn't need the facility. Maybe you were planning a wedding or a big event and now the event had to be canceled. What do you do? Are you bound to that contract? And a lot of people have a lot of automatic assumptions. And the first place you always have to start when you have a contract issue is with your contract itself. A lot of contracts, if they're thoroughly drafted, will have provisions that deal with these things. You might hear the term force majeure. That's a term that a lot of people hear. What it means is acts outside of your control. A lot of times force majeure means act of God. You'll hear that term. It's an act of God, or it's a force majeure. Some contracts will have a force majeure clause. And so if you have a contract and it has a force majeure clause, does that mean you're set? The answer is yes, no, maybe, depends. And what I mean by that is, at the end of the day, you have to read your contract, because we've looked at, in the last 2 weeks, a lot of force majeure clauses. We've looked at a lot of contracts, and the way some of them are written, I've read some clauses which say that if there is an act of God where there is a tornado or hurricane or natural weather event that prohibits you from complying, you don't have to comply. And it's written so narrowly that a pandemic wouldn't necessarily fit into that particular clause. There are other clauses that are written so broadly that they say if you are prohibited from performing due to an act of God, such as a weather event, or a national emergency, such as a global strike, or some other national event, or national, very few of them use the word pandemic, it's a new term for us, but other broad terms like that. I've read some clauses that definitely are written broadly enough that yes, it would include a pandemic. So some of your contracts that you have may already have clauses that say that if you can't perform your contract because of this current pandemic situation, then you don't have to worry about it. There's a way for you to get out of that contract. So the first place to always start is look at the actual contract you're dealing with. Now, when we help clients, what we do, our strategy that we employ when we're dealing with someone is always step back for a minute, look at the environment you're dealing with, show me your contract if you have one. What does your contract say? And let's see what your rights are. So before we go into any situation, we want to know what your rights are. After we know what your rights are, though, particularly in an environment like this, as we said, we want to work together. The next step would be reaching out to the person that you're in a contract with and seeing what their perspective is. They may understand the situation. They may be willing to work with you. Maybe it's a situation where you can postpone performance. Maybe it's a situation where because the event has passed, you don't need performance, and you're willing to come up with a mutual solution where neither party is devastated. And in situations like we're facing today, that's a solution that we hope to look for, creative solutions, if there is one available, something that we hope everybody would explore. If there's not that situation, then again, if it's a situation where someone says, nope, I'm going to honor my contract, I'm going to expect you to perform in a situation where you can't, then you fall back on your rights. So again, first place to start though, what does your contract say? Is there a clause? So what do you do if you don't have a contract? Or there's no clause. You don't have a force majeure clause. You don't have an act of God clause. There's nothing in your contract that deals with it. Well, there are also ways and provisions that can help you. There are things in what we call, lawyers refer to as the common law, things that have developed through case law over time. And there are a couple of concepts that are really appropriate to this situation. The two that are most applicable today, there's a concept in the law called frustration of purpose, and another concept called impossibility. So if you've entered into a contract but the performance becomes impossible, or the purpose for which the contract was entered into is frustrated, there are mechanisms in the law to allow you to get out of that contract. Now, like every good legal provision, to give lawyers something to argue about, they put stipulations on those provisions. Some of those things include items that the court looks at, like, was the condition something that existed at the time you entered into the contract? And for most of you, if you entered into this before this pandemic started, no, it wasn't there. If you just entered into this contract yesterday and you want to try and use the pandemic to get out of it, probably not going to work for you. But for most of us, if it's a contract that we entered into before we knew this was going to happen, that's not going to be a problem. Something else that the courts look at is, was it foreseeable? And again, if you entered into this knowing a week ago, knowing this was a possibility, the court might look at you and say, this was a foreseeable event. But if you entered into this a month ago, nobody foresaw that any of this was going to happen. So again, that's going to be something that's going to help you get out of the situation. Some other things that the courts look at for the concept of frustration of purpose, that doctrine, did both parties know what the purpose was? So if you went into it and everyone knew what the purpose was, classic example, you're renting a hall for a wedding, and the wedding can't go forward. Clearly everyone knew what the purpose was. As long as both parties know what the purpose is, that's a situation where the law, frustration of purpose, would allow you to get out of that contract. So the point is, in this time, there's a lot of uncertainty, but there are a lot of legal doctrines that can help you navigate your way through contracts. There are some factors that are always going to come into play, but there are principles that can help you navigate your way through some of those things. But again, the first place to start is if you have a contract, what does it say? There are some contracts that we've seen that have provisions which we call assumption of risk provisions, where they will say things like, in this contract, you assume all risks of changes in governmental regulations, changes in circumstances. If your contract has something like that, it could bind you to it. So again, first place to start, you have to read your contract and see what it says. But if there's nothing in there, it's silent on most of these issues, which most contracts don't really address these situations because we're in uncharted territory, something that people haven't really expected. So just wanted to give you that comfort that for those of you that are concerned about where the lay of the land is, those are some of the basic legal principles. You do have somewhere to go. And I have my colleague, I think that's it on the contract examples that I was going to talk about. But again, as I mentioned at the start, at Cooper and Riesterer, there are a lot of other business questions, business issues people are facing. We are going to try and take some of those that clients are asking us and draft our answers and put them on our website so we can hopefully address issues that people are having and allay some concerns just to help people get through this time. A lot of people are having concerns about how to deal with employment concerns, and Jennifer is another one of our corporate attorneys in our office, and she has a particular expertise in the employment realm, and so she's going to address a lot of those employment concerns and questions that people have. So,
Thank you.
Jennifer Gross from Cooper Riesterer.
All right, thank you, Kathy. Again, Jennifer Gross from the law firm of Cooper and Riesterer here in Brighton. To reiterate, Kathy mentioned some resources that are available to small business owners. Obviously, the Brighton Chamber of Commerce provides some great resources. We've also got the Small Business Administration, SBA.gov, the Michigan Chamber of Commerce, as well as our website. You can visit us at www.crlaw.biz for some more great resources. So what I wanted to talk about today is some information about, for employers specifically, who are facing some challenges or changes due to this pandemic that we're experiencing right now. And as we know, there are some businesses that have simply been asked to shut down because of the industry that they're in. Others have been asked to reduce the services that they're offering, such as restaurants. You can only do carry out. There's some restrictions that are applying there. But for the rest of employers that are still operating, I wanted to provide some information both for employers who have had to reduce workloads as well as those who continue to operate. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is if you are still operating, to the extent that you have not done so already, it's really important that you make a plan for how you're going to reduce the exposure of your employees and your customers and others coming into your place of work to this COVID-19 virus. So you need to make a plan and institute procedures consistent with that plan. Make sure that employees and others, contractors, understand what that plan is and how they're to comply with it. Some example of some protective procedures that you can implement to the extent that they're possible for your business is you can make working from home telecommuting available to employees to the extent that's possible. Obviously, that's not possible for everybody's business model. Not all businesses have that type of business where that's possible, but if it is, make that available. And definitely encourage employees to stay home if they're not feeling well, if they're sick, if they've had any kind of exposure or believe they may have had exposure. Make sure you're emphasizing to them that you really don't want employees coming to work if they're not feeling well. This is important not just to do our civic duty to prevent transmission, but it's also important for liability purposes because you don't want to have other employees or customers potentially exposed to this illness. Other things that you can do possibly are obviously take steps to reduce transmission, observe the 6-foot rule that we were talking about earlier, no handshaking, have customers to the extent possible handle business through telephone, telecommuting if possible. In our office, for example, we've moved to doing all of our client meetings where possible over the phone to avoid those face-to-face meetings. And then if you have employees that travel for work, try to postpone their travel if you can. If not, make sure that they're well aware of the CDC recommendations about protecting yourself while traveling. The CDC has a lot of information available on what you can do to ensure that you are reducing the chances of transmission. And then there's obviously some travel restrictions to certain countries that you need to be aware of if you have employees traveling internationally for business. One thing to be cognizant of that people may not think about when they're implementing these procedures to try to protect their employees is that you also have to be cognizant of the potential discrimination issues, liability issues arising from targeting specific populations within your employee group. So, for example, something that you may not think of is we've heard that the elderly are more susceptible to this virus transmission or have potentially worse outcomes. You can't implement a procedure that requires only people that are 50 plus to work from home. That might make sense in a non-transmission perspective, but the Age Discrimination and Employment Act would definitely prohibit that from, would make you potentially liable as an employer for doing something like that. So just you have to keep in mind that we have to be cognizant of our obligations as an employer to protect our employees, but we can't, put ourselves at risk for potential liability as well. If you have a case of suspected exposure or a confirmed case, you need to make sure that other employees who were exposed to or potentially exposed to that employee are notified. What you can't do is disclose medical information. You can't indicate which employee had the suspected or confirmed case. That would be a violation of some of the HIPAA protection laws, and you need to make sure that stays confidential. Other potential employment issues that don't pertain to transmission are, what if you're in a situation where you don't have enough employees to cover your workload? You have a lot of people out of work, or a lot of people are afraid to come to work. You can certainly hire temporary employees, but watch out for using volunteers. For a private for-profit business, there's no such thing as volunteer employees. You got to be paying everybody minimum wage, otherwise you're going to run afoul of the Fair Labor Standards Act. So that's something to be aware of. Excuse me. If you are faced with an early closure issue, meaning you had to close your business or shut down part of your business and send employees home, you may be wondering, do I have to pay them? Can I still pay them? What is the situation? Generally speaking, if you have non-exempt employees, hourly employees, you only have to pay them for the hours that they've worked. But for salaried employees, if you want to maintain their exempt status, you've got to make sure that you are still paying them their salary, even if they're not at work. You can require them to take sick leave, you can require them to take vacation leave, but you have to continue to pay them if you want to continue to have them be an exempt employee under the Fair Labor Standards Act. So that's something to be aware of, because I know a lot of people are in that situation where there are employees who are either not coming to work because they don't feel safe, or there's situations where employers just simply don't have the work, especially smaller businesses that may have been affected by this pandemic. Another thing that OSHA covered employers may want to be concerned about is that There is no specific COVID-19 standard for people who are covered, for employers who are covered by OSHA. But if you are an employer who's required to implement personal protective standards with regard to your employees, you want to make sure that now more than ever you're complying with those requirements. Again, there's no specific COVID-19 requirement, but you want to make sure that you're not exposing anybody any more than necessary, especially considering what's going on right now. In addition, there may be situations where COVID-19 is a required reporting event for OSHA-covered employers. So if there's a concern that the infection was transmitted on the job, then that may have to be reported. So just keep that in mind if you find out any of your employees have been confirmed. Again, as we talked about in Livingston County, the doctor was talking about earlier, there may have been one confirmed case. That may not be an issue right now, but if things progress and we see some more cases, that may become an issue for some employers. Another thing that's important potentially for OSHA-covered employers, if you don't know, you're not required, if you have employees that are working from home during this time, you're not required to make sure that their home office comply with OSHA requirements. Some people know that, others may not because they've never had the occasion to have people working from home, but that is not a requirement. You don't have to inspect their home office or anything like that to make sure it complies with OSHA, just in case you weren't aware of that. Also, if you are an FMLA covered employer, which is typically an employer with 50 or more employees within a 75-mile region, you are still subject to FMLA requirements. So if someone is ill and needs to stay at home, if it rises to the level of a serious illness, it's covered by FMLA. You have to allow those leave. You're still subject to those leave requirements. Even if it doesn't rise to the level of a serious illness, the federal government is encouraging employers to grant that type of leave broadly, if possible, just to prevent transmission. So even if it's not a serious medical condition that results, it's still a good idea to allow employees to take that type of leave where it's possible for the employer to do so. There is some discussion, well, there's been a lot of discussion about a federal aid package that's supposed to provide more aid to employees specifically and also small businesses. That has not been finalized yet as of today, is my understanding, but that could contain a lot more aid provisions for people who have been affected by this. But it's still a very evolving situation, and we don't know exactly what the final version will contain. Another thing that's really important, and not specifically an employee issue, but it's related, is your communication with the public regarding what you're doing to try to prevent the spread of this illness. So just from a business perspective, you want your customers to know that you are taking steps to prevent the spread of COVID-19, that you are observing all CDC guidance with regard to maintaining social distancing and heightened sanitation procedures and things like that. That will likely prevent, or hopefully will prevent, people not patronizing your business because they're afraid of some kind of transmission. So we want to make sure that you're losing as little business as possible over this issue, while still maintaining safety protocols. Finally, if you do have people, if you're in a situation where you've had to lay off employees, which is a lot of businesses, at least temporarily, a couple of things that I wanted to make you aware of. The first is there's a work share program through the Michigan Department of State. There's a lot of information available online. I'm not going to get into the details, but what it does is allows you to subsidize, in some respects, your full-time employees if you need to lay them off or reduce their workload because of your reduction in business. You may qualify for this work share program, which allows the Unemployment Insurance Agency to provide partial payment of benefits to full-time employees who qualify, who are having reduced workloads. It's an alternative to laying off an employee entirely. So that's something that you can check out if you think that you need to reduce full-time employee workloads, but you don't, or you prefer not to terminate employees unless absolutely necessary. So that's something that you can find on the State of Michigan website, cmichigan.gov for more information on that. And then for those employees that are laid off, this is something more for the employees, but just be aware that Governor Whitmer has expanded the unemployment benefits for an additional 6 weeks. So it used to be 20 weeks maximum, now it's 26 weeks. There is additional unemployment available for unemployment benefits available for people who have had to be laid off, at least temporarily, for either illness themselves or for caring for someone who is ill with this virus. And I've heard from, or I've read from the state of Michigan that they are fast tracking those unemployment benefit applications. I don't have any specific data about how much faster those are going through, but they're supposed to be fast tracking those so people get their benefits sooner rather than later. And again, some creditors are allowing forbearance on payments for people who have suffered some financial hardship as a result of these measures, and that could possibly include small business owners as well, but certainly employees who have had their hours reduced or cut because of these business closures or slowdowns.
Okay, so we do have some questions here. Thank you so
Okay.
much. Kathy's also here as well. And then we'll have to scroll because I think there are quite a few questions here. Okay, so what about employees that wish to claim unemployment and stay home with children?
So there are the unemployment benefits that have been expanded, have also been expanded to people who have to stay home to care for children as a result of school closures or as a result of that child's illness with this virus. So those are two situations where unemployment benefits are available. They were not before, and that's temporary to help people during this time. But it is available if you have to stay home because your child now, the schools are closed and you don't have child care. Unemployment benefits are available for those individuals.
Okay, if you lay off staff, can they get unemployment or only after PTO, paid time off, time is used?
If they've got, if they have paid time off, you can require them to use paid time off. That would be sending them home, not laying them off. If you've terminated their employment, then they are eligible for applying for unemployment benefits, even if they have paid time off remaining and your company has a provision where you pay out paid time off. But you are, as an employer, if they've got paid time off available and you are sending people home, you are allowed to require that they use that paid time off first and then any other benefits that they may have.
So I think that you answered that first question up there just now as well. What do you mean exempt for salary employees? Maybe go into detail on that.
Okay. Yes, I'm using legal terminology, so I'll clarify that because that's not the lay term that people are used to hearing. So exempt means that you are exempt from the Fair Labor Standards Act general requirement that you've got to be paid a minimum hourly rate for every hour worked, and you've got to be paid overtime for every hour that you go over 40 hours. If you're a salaried employee, you don't get paid overtime if you work 50 hours or 60 hours in a given week. So my statement about exempt versus non-exempt is that if you are temporarily shut down, but you have employees who you wish to retain, if they're exempt, if they're non-exempt, meaning they're hourly, you only have to pay them for the hours worked. But the salaried employees, if you want to continue to have them be employed versus terminating them or laying them off, you've got to continue to pay them their salary. Otherwise, they become non-exempt and they become hourly employees at that point. So if you want to preserve that exempt salaried employee status, you've got to continue to pay them their salary. But like I said, if they have vacation time accrued, if they've got paid time off benefits, you can require that they use those before you're required to continue to pay their salary if they're not working. And again, you're allowed to terminate their employment, but this is if you want to potentially call these people back after maybe a short-term layoff or a short-term ceasing in operations.
Okay, I have a question here about, what about domestic travel?
Okay. As far as domestic travel goes, I would still say, I mean, the CDC's guidelines are to reduce travel, period. So if you have work-related travel, it's not that you can't travel, it's just that I would ask you to consider, is it necessary? Is there something that can be done remotely via video conferencing rather than in person? In our office, we take depositions. We are trying to do that via video depositions versus having clients come in, potentially fly across the country to do so and sit for depositions. So if you can do that, that's what's being recommended. If you can't, then there's a whole list of preventative measures that you can take if you are traveling. But most of it involves, like the doctor said, washing your hands, maintaining distance, and definitely not traveling if you are feeling sick.
You just
Sure.
condense that really quickly?
Absolutely. So contract employees are a little bit different. That kind of goes to what Kathy was talking about more, is if you have a contract employee, if you have a written contract, what does it say about what you're required to do in the event of impossibility or in the event that the work is not available? Can you terminate it at will? Do they have any kind of recourse? Do you have to give them notice? All those things would be in the contract, so it might be a specific situation. But generally speaking, that's really all that's all that you would be governed by. Otherwise, a contract employee is, you could terminate them. You're not going to be responsible for any kind of unemployment insurance increase or anything like that. But again, it just goes back to the contract. What does it say?
Okay, well, thank you so much, Jennifer, and thank you, Catherine,
Thank
so
you,
much
everyone.
for answering those questions. We have, as a chamber, sent out a lot of material. I have personally sent it out, probably to the point where it might be a little bit of overkill, but there's so many things that are coming out now, and we don't know the time frame, like if we're going to have to leave our business or whatever for a period of time for quarantine. We don't know that, so that's why I'm pushing it out. So bear with me and our other staff if we are sending out a lot of emails, but normally we don't need to do that because this is a different type of a circumstance. We are here for you no matter what, and if there's anything that we can do for you, we'll be doing more things like this, and they'll be streamlined a little bit. We're just experimenting today a little bit, but we wanted to get this information to you. But we are all here, our staff. You can see us. I'll get out of the way. I've been here. Let's see. Anyway, do you have any questions for our team? We are here to answer any questions. Can we unmute or?
That's already done, I think.
No. Okay. I guess,
They can type them.
oh, you could type in, okay. Marcia, while we're doing this, I want to thank you for all of these websites that you've put up. And thank you for letting us know about the case in Livingston County now, and we appreciate it. Okay, any questions?
Thank you, ladies.
Oh, okay.
We heard that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pam and staff.
Oh, thank you. Well, we can hear you. We're so glad to be able to hear you. Do you have any questions for us? Are you any concerns? Is there anything that we can do for you? Michael Powers, thank you. Michael Powers, I just want to tell you, and Selcra, they will be taking over with us the farmers market. So you saw me looking for somebody to manage that. Thank God for Michael Powers, his team at Selcra. The Brighton Farmers Market might start a little bit late. We're not sure with all these dates, but the sooner that we can end this virus, the faster we'll have that farmers market up and rolling. Sandy, thank you for putting this on. We appreciate that. Mary Beth, thank you for your comments there. We appreciate it too. So anything else for us? Any of our staff, we're here. I'll give you a little bit of an update on our civic events downtown. We are planning on those, by you guys, we're planning on those civic events to take place. Right now, we don't know, like I said, what the dates are, but our Art in the Park in Pinckney, We're still planning on that. We're planning on our golf outing. We're planning on our art festival, and we're looking forward to our smoke and jazz. And then we have a new country event coming up after that in October. So we're planning on that. So if you want to be part of that, if you want to join in sponsorship, that'd be great. We could use it. Thank you, Tina. I see your comment there. And then Marcia wrote from Ann Arbor Spark. Gaborowski, she wrote, Spark will be working with the Brighton Chamber of Commerce on getting more information on WorkShare program. And actually, thank you, Marcia, I put that out today. I do believe I put out a large PDF link on that today. Thank you, Stacy. Okay, I know you probably don't want me to, all the thanks and all that, but we're so grateful for you. So as much as you are being very kind and gracious to us, we're very grateful for you. Does anybody want to say anything from the staff here?
Well, we've taken precautions here at the Chamber to eliminate meetings because we care about our members and the community, and we want all of you to be healthy and well. And so we're just taking this every day, one day at a time, just like you. And so we just thank you to all of you that have joined us here today, and we're going to get better at doing this. And this is we see great things happening in the face of a crisis. And those are good. There are some good things that will come of this, that's for sure. But
Come here, Sophia.
we just want everybody to be well and healthy.
Sophia Frenny, she has been the person who has put this together for us and signed us up for all of these online webinars. So I want to thank Sophia.
Yep.
So you can clap from home if there's any, or wherever you are. Okay, well, we're here for you. Our doors are locked, but you can wave. No, you can. They don't like it when I let people in, but I still let them in. But anyway, okay, peace, love, and joy to all of you. We love you all.